Government warnings on cigarette packages. Well, we've all seen them if we've seen a cigarette package lately in the United States. Well, last year, 2011, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, came up with the requirement that cigarette manufacturers put some pretty significant warnings on packages. Wow, when you look at these, they are pretty scary kinds of warnings. Needless to say, cigarette companies weren't pleased with these warnings, so they sued. They sued and they said, hey, free speech exists, and part of free speech means you can't compel us what to say. Therefore, you can't tell us what to put on a cigarette package when it comes to illustrations and when it comes to the majority of the package. Government said, well, there's a good reason for this, because we all know cigarette smoking causes significant harm, and in order to prevent that significant harm, we think people need to get a real jolting message, and that's why we're requiring these kind of really in-your-face warnings. Okay, well, it went to trial, and that was pretty widely reported when earlier this year, March 2012, a federal district court in the District of Columbia said, guess what, government? You are wrong. You are wrong. You cannot require compelled speech. Compelled speech, of course, is any time government says you must behave, you must say certain things in a certain way. And as a result of not being able to have compelled speech, these cigarette labeling, the new ones which have been proposed by the FDA, cannot go forward. Well, the case was appealed, and we just got the decision here in September of 2012, and it actually just came out and has been widely reported, but in which the appellate court, U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, came away and said, you know what, that initial decision made by the trial court is correct. And the reason it's correct is that government can't compel speech, and importantly, if it is going to try and compel speech, it must show a significant state interest. It must show some interest the government has that is so significant that it basically will cause the First Amendment to be pushed aside. And here, the Food and Drug Administration didn't have any evidence. They didn't come forward with anything showing that these illustrations, that these warnings that they're proposing would actually cause people to buy less cigarettes. And since they did not have any compelling evidence for this, they cannot require the cigarette companies to have these labels on the cigarette packages. All right. What did we learn in this case? We learned a very important thing. We learned that under the First Amendment, not only does a citizen of the United States have the freedom of speech, we also have freedom from compelled speech, meaning government can't tell us what to say or how to say it. And that's what this case was really all about. Now, is it possible this case goes up to the U.S. Supreme Court? It's possible, but the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't necessarily have to accept every case that people want to take to it. It chooses the cases that it will decide. And at this point in time, we don't know if it will get up there. If it does get up there, we could get a different decision. But we've now had two courts, the trial court and the U.S. Court of Appeals, say, in this instance, FDA, you can't compel speech. You can't tell cigarette companies what they must say. Because under the First Amendment, not only do we have free speech, we have the right not to be required to say something government wants us to say. Okay, we bring you this case as we're bringing cases every week so you understand how the law works. I'm David Allen.